All right, let's update the gold market where we're at. Um, this one's a little bit tough to call here. Normally, I like to see, I'll put it this way, about 95% of the time, a daily cycle low will break the cycle uptrend line. We haven't done that yet. So usually when I violate my rules, it ends up coming back to bite me in the ass. So I'm going to say at this point, I'm still assuming we've got one more move down that breaks this trend line before we get our final daily cycle low. But you know, no rule is 100%. So, and I have seen this every once in a while. It's pretty rare, but every once in a while, I'll see a daily cycle low that just violates this rule. It just doesn't break the trend line. Usually, it happens when the trend line is really flat. So let's say if this pivot right here had been deep, you know, double bottom type of thing, and bounced, then this trend line would have been really flat here. And then in that instance, I would expect that it would not break the trend line. But this is pretty much a normal angle trend line, and this so far anyway, this has not broken that trend line. Um, but like I said, it just may not happen. We've got the other two confirmations. Price has closed below the 10-day moving average, and it has turned the 10-day moving average down. This is very late in the daily cycle. So if this is going to roll over and give us one more leg down and break this, it's going to have to do it pretty quickly. Otherwise, the cycle just gets too stretched. So up in the air, I'm going to reserve judgment on this one as to whether or not this is a final daily cycle low or not. If this is a daily cycle low and we're going to rally out of this, then price should come up and break back above this 10-day moving average, should at least marginally turn it up. And what I would watch at that point would be the RSI. If this was an intermediate top and we are now in the declining phase of the intermediate cycle, then a couple of things. Price probably should not make a higher high. It's not out of the question. We could still make a higher high and then still roll over in a left translated pattern, but that would be the outlier scenario. Probably not the most likely scenario. The most likely, in my opinion, would be if this does turn out to be a daily cycle low that just fails to give us that final confirmation, that we would rally up, probably come short of this top, and as soon as the RSI gets overbought, then price would turn back down and start the left translation of this daily cycle. I've noted this before. When we're in the declining phase, here's a good example here, the declining phase of the intermediate cycle, price tends to not be able to hold overbought levels, and then it tends to come back down, and this was kind of a chopping move, but it tends to get oversold or embed in the oversold condition. You can see this pretty good example of embedding in the heavily oversold condition. This is kind of typical of what would happen during the declining phase of an intermediate cycle. So depending on what happens tomorrow and then maybe the first 2 days of next week, we'll know whether or not this is a final daily cycle low. And if it is, then I'm going to keep an eye on the RSI, and I would expect that as soon as RSI gets overbought, price will turn back down and start another leg down. It'll start the left translation of this daily cycle. Ultimately, we need to have a failed daily cycle before the intermediate cycle is complete. And then if this does turn out to be the daily cycle low, then we would need, after a bounce, price would need to come down and move below this. That would constitute a failed daily cycle. So we would look something like this, a little rally, enough to get the RSI overbought, and then we would start stair stepping down. I would imagine we would get, some rallies along the way, and then our final intermediate cycle low. Like I said, I think it's got to come down and test at least 1800. 1750-ish seems more likely to me, as that was a major resistance point that the banks defended for almost 2 months before the buying pressure finally overwhelmed the attempts to prevent gold from getting above that level. So that, in my mind, that seems like the most likely support zone to come back down and test during the next intermediate cycle low. So we'll just have to see, like I said, how tomorrow and Monday and Tuesday play out. That'll tell me whether or not this was a final daily cycle low. If we start down again quickly tomorrow, then I would be back to the scenario where I would expect this cycle trend line to break before we get our final daily cycle low. And in that scenario, we would probably come down and test 1800 at the daily cycle low before we get our bounce, and then our left translated daily cycle after that.